I was 13 when my parents sold me. Not kidnapped, not lost, sold. Oath nobody, he warned me. I woke up to a house so cold I thought I might freeze. The windows rattled and my parents were nowhere, gone without a word. I didn't know if they'd ever come back, or if this was the start of something gets worse. Then my phone buzzed. See you in 10 days. We set the alarm. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and that's when he arrived, my uncle, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. What I couldn't see then was how every choice, every word he would say was calculated. Like a game I didn't even know I was playing. I had no idea I'd been sold, and what came next would change everything. Every time I see my phone, I feel nauseous. This morning, its vibration woke me up again. It was 6:47 a.m. There was a photo of my mother on the screen. A light blue dress by the sea with the sun on her head. She looked happy. Of course, it wasn't my mother calling. Mothers aren't the ones calling at this age, at least not my mother. I passed the notification. I just lay in bed, counting the ceiling, 69, 70. I always stopped at the same number and turned my eyes towards the door. The silence of the house was heavy. I felt it as a physiological sound, like a heartbeat, like breathing. During the 16 years I lived in it, I had learned this silence as a language. If it was a form of writing, it was constructed from emptiness instead of words. I got out of bed and went down to the kitchen. The light here was different, cold, blue, and white, with a plastic feel to it. Even though it was my own house, I felt like a visitor. I picked up the cup and listened to the clinking of glasses as I made the coffee. Little things that can be controlled. My cell phone was on the kitchen table. 3 more messages from my mother were on the screen. I didn't read them. I knew they'd be the same: vacation photos, family news, and enough affection to exclude me. I couldn't delete them. I didn't check. I preferred living with my ghost to talking to a real person. I looked out the window at the garden. It was empty. Untidy spaces, undesigned corners. As my father would say, it's expensive neglect. But I wasn't expensive. I was just a penniless failure. The invitation to come home arrived last week. It read, "We miss you with love," a love they didn't even feel while writing it. It was as if they'd chosen the reporter's name from a list of non-existent professions. I didn't tear up the paper. I put it in a corner, the best place to avoid looking at it. I spent 4 hours working that morning. I sat in front of the computer, drawing sketches as if I were building someone else's life. An office building, glass and steel. People will be inside, going up and down stairs, waiting in elevators. I designed it in such a way that no one will ever feel alone. The phone rang. It was a number I didn't want to see. He didn't say a word. I switched the device off. I slept for a few hours in the afternoon, that kind of sleep where there are no thoughts, no faces randomly appearing. I woke up without remembering why. Simply, I had been deemed sufficient and had gotten up. There were leftover pizza scraps in the fridge, 3 days old, the crisp pink cheese crust. I wasn't someone who didn't want to eat it, just someone who questioned who I was eating it for. When people were home alone, did they torture their own bodies? Did they try to live without eating? Or was existence simply a matter of choice? I heated the pizza and ate it from the balcony, looking out at the sea. At 5 in the afternoon, an email arrived from the office. They requested revisions to the Meadowbrook project, a 5-story residential building, $700 million investment. The contractor wanted to reduce the size of the balconies to cut costs, they said. Cutting costs. It was all about cost. Was the version with wider balconies? People would be able to stand there and see the city, cool and outdoorsy. A little space to breathe? In the contractor's version, the balconies had become a summer extension, the kind nobody would actually stand in. I sent the revisions back. Stay with the original design. People need space. Space saves people. The manager replied, "The contractor is the decision maker here. Keep the budget in check." The budget. I lived in a world where everything was measured by money. People like me were measured by their lack of money. Maybe that's why they were making balconies smaller so that no one would stand there and ponder, so that they wouldn't get lost. At 8 o'clock that night, alone at home, I thought of Robert. The last time I saw him, he was in a hospital room. I remembered him watching the ocean tides from the window. His voice was light as a spirit, his words boundless like air. Success, he said, is not engineering. It's not some modern job where no one can see you. Success is being able to remain in someone else's darkness without extinguishing your own light. I didn't understand it back then. Now I have enough time to understand. Spent the night preparing an online gallery guide for my design portfolio. These weren't my own buildings. They were designed by others, buildings under my control. The reception area was perfectly lit. People didn't wait 2 seconds longer in the elevators. Air circulation on the stairs was optimal. No one was lost. No one was alone. But me? Where am I after all these buildings? This morning, I received a call from my lawyer, Ismail Whitmore. It wasn't a pleasant name, too cold, too formal. I noticed you changed your last name, he asked when we first met. Whitmore, did it sound stronger? Yes, I'm one of the few people who can choose their own identity. That's what I've said. But that wasn't a lie, nor was it entirely true. It's a sign of escape, breaking free from the old name, separating from the organization, beginning to become something else. The lawyer said, "We need to process the documents you signed for the deed of wealth." Robert's estate, it had passed entirely in my name. $63 million real estate and stocks. Any news from your brother's family? He asked. No, I said. A threat of lawsuit often means a settlement. Agreement. It sounded like another architectural term. I was inspecting the structure. The people inside had already moved on. At lunchtime, the cardiologist called me. He wanted Robert's most recent medical records for my signature. His medical history, medications, recent events. Officially, the cause of death was heart failure, yes. But I knew, to put it in architect's terms, that the internal structure had crumbled. The exterior looked perfect, but the foundations were leaking. They were crumbling. There was no dinner. I noticed my hands trembling as I prepared the salad. Why? Was it cold? Tiredness? Or was my body sensing things my mind wasn't? I put the salad down, sat at the table, and instead of eating, looked out the window. Outside, people were out for a walk. Couples, families, groups of friends. No one was alone. A message arrived from someone different than the others. Marcus Reynolds, I'm familiar with your designs. Would you like to talk about a new project? Marcus Reynolds, the owner of a large construction company, was presenting me with a $20 million complex project, luxury apartments, commercial spaces, meeting rooms. We need someone like you, he said. Someone who can create spaces that make people feel. The male, I suddenly heard Robert's voice in my own thoughts. Create spaces where people feel themselves, not spaces that make people feel. Don't you know the difference? Yes, Robert, I know the difference. Late at night, around 2 o'clock, I had the same dream again. A frozen turkey. The kitchen light was off. The doorbell rang. But this time it wasn't Robert who answered, it was my mother. She was handing me a check. You're worth it, she was saying. You were worth it. I woke up crying in the dream. As morning approached, I continued working. I revised the Meadowbrook project, keeping the balconies as they were. I wrote an article defending the people. The manager said he would speak with the contractor. No news. Marcus's project. We set a date for a presentation, the 3rd Thursday of October. My phone was still vibrating with messages, but I wasn't answering it anymore. When I saw photos of my mother in my contacts, was it a feeling, a will, or simply a mechanical choice? I gave it another name, Ghost. I created a file called Sculpture and put them there. I decided not to look at them. After 5 o'clock, I called my architect, Patrick. He's my partner in the project and one of those who immediately understood me. We're starting work on the Marcus project, I said. At the beginning? He asked. I will be in charge. The voice was silent for a second. Then you need to show your head this time. Give up your invisibility. Maybe he was right. Maybe this time it would be different. Maybe I needed to rebuild myself too, not just buildings, but as a person. Frozen turkey, congregational, without any signs of return such as burial sites, sold girls, or silent libraries. Just the architect, a human being moving forward. Before going to bed, I pulled out the last book Robert had given me, Structural Psychology. He'd made notes in the margins, things that seemed to have been written for me. On the last page, written in red ink, it said, "Elicit, people live in the very heart of structures. Without people, a structure is a wreck. Learn to build yourself. Then others won't be able to try to build you." I turned off the light. At 3:39 for the first time, instead of feeling Robert's absence, I felt myself unshakable, in place, done. That day, everything seemed ordinary. People went about their routines as the morning sun rose, but some details began to stand out. Small shortcomings went unnoticed. These overlooked details grew over time. Plans underwent minor changes. These changes weren't explicitly communicated to anyone. Everything left unsaid created silent pressure. Reduced communication weakened trust. As trust weakened, everyone acted cautiously. Caution slowed down the decision-making process. This slowdown led to missed opportunities. Missed opportunities increased tension. Even if it wasn't consciously acknowledged, the tension was palpable. Everyone was right from their own perspective, but their perspectives didn't converge. Different priorities created disagreement. This disagreement created a silent distance. This distance grew over time and changed the atmosphere. Ultimately, the process reached an unexpected point. Marcus Reynolds' office was on the 30th floor. The windows offered a view of the entire city, millions of people. Millions of lives, all living in tiny boxes. It was going to be a complex architectural project. I knew that. But Marcus's request of me wasn't just to build buildings. "You need to create a community," he said at the first meeting. "A place where people can come and feel at home. It's not a commercial space, it's an emotional one." Hearing this, Robert's words echoed in my ears. Not spaces that make people feel, but spaces where people feel themselves. Marcus seemed unaware of this. But that's exactly what he wanted. A patron is one of the rare people who understands an architect's philosophy. For 2 weeks, I only allocated 2 hours for sleep. I planned everything, from the model to the city itself. Stairs, balconies, common areas, even fountains. People would feel safe and open around every corner. The design was built on the principles Robert taught me. Control had to remain hidden, but his impact had to be felt. On Sunday morning, the day before the presentation, my phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't answer. Immediately afterward, a message arrived. A voicemail. "Greetings, I'm Victoria. I'm Gabriel's sister. I heard you've become a very successful architect. I also heard you acquired all of Robert's estate. I'd like to talk to you. Please call me." Gabriel, my mother's last name. I paused for a moment. Then, slowly, I turned the phone back on. Victoria, my mother's sister. Someone I'd never met. Someone who never called me. Someone who didn't remember me. Why now? I deleted the message. I got up very early the morning of the presentation. I got dressed precisely on time, a black suit, silver accessories. I prepared myself in the way Robert taught me, not visible, but felt. Silent power. When I arrived at Marcus's office, 9 people were sitting in the conference room. Contractors, investors, city planners. They were all waiting. I showed them the slides, every detail, from the choice of materials and lighting design to the layout of the social areas. But as I spoke, I noticed no one was reading the paper. They were all looking at me. Maybe this had never happened before. Maybe I had always stayed in the background. Now I was stepping into the spotlight. After the presentation, Marcus rose to his feet and applauded. The others did too. "That's exactly what I wanted," he said. "If you sign, construction can begin in 3 months." My signature meant an agreement. My signature would shape the lives of others. An hour later, a second email arrived. This time, I showed it to my mother. It contained old photos, songs, and videos, and a note. Please consider getting back to us next week. Something happened to your father. It's not serious, but he wants to see you. Something happened to your father. It's nothing serious, but he wants to see you. I turned off the computer. I continued working. I didn't receive anything for a whole week. Marcus's team prepared the construction plans. Patrick and I finished the interior decoration details. Everything was in order, smooth, completely under control. On Thursday, the doorbell rang. 7 o'clock in the morning. Nobody came. Nobody brought anyone here at 7 in the morning. Without opening the door, I looked at the ringer. A woman was standing there, in her 50s, light brown hair, very familiar eyes. Victoria. The woman who was going to ruin my life, because I had started looking after my mother. I didn't open the door. I raised my voice and spoke from behind it. I know who you are. I suggest you leave. Please, he said from behind the door. Just 10 minutes. Not about Robert's will. It's about your father. Your father. The word was terrifying, like an electric shock. My father had never been my father. After 29 years, your father was just a voice, just a means of receiving money, just a memory. I opened the door, seated her across the table. Control. Everything controlled. Do you have any news from your father? He asked. No, I'd prefer not to know at all. Lung cancer. It was diagnosed 4 months ago. No one dared to tell you. I waited. I was waiting to feel something. Sadness, anger, anxiety. Nothing came. He wants to end his life, Victoria continued. He's incurable. The doctors give him a year, maybe 2, and he wants to say his last words to you. The things she wanted arrived too late, I said quietly. Victoria took a long breath. The money they got for selling you, $500,000, they never used it for anything else. You know that, right? I know. But what you don't know is how devastated this was for them, especially your father. Even on his deathbed, he was crying because he wanted to see you. He wasn't as rigid as Susan. Jeffrey didn't just see the money. He didn't see his child. Silence. It felt like an endless silence. It wasn't Robert's silence. It was an empty silence, devoid of any meaning. I just do architecture, I said. I don't manage people. Saving people isn't my job. I know, said Victoria, but being human is your job. And you're acting as if you know nothing about the architects of human behavior. I got up and walked toward the door. Victoria didn't take it. She just sat there. I'm leaving an address, she said, placing a piece of paper on the table. If you want. If you dare. After they left, I picked up the paper. The address indicated a hospital building in the west of the city, a room number on the ground floor, and a date. Next Friday, 3 p.m. 4 days, 4 days, I thought about it. I needed to give my opinion on Marcus's project. There were a few minor changes to be made. Patrick asked me, "Is everything all right?" I said yes, but yes was a lie. When I woke up Friday morning, I knew what I was going to do. I sent a letter to the company saying, I'm taking a day off to deal with an urgent family matter. On the way to the hospital, I repeated the words Robert had spoken to me in his final months. Architects will learn to live with mistakes. My father was in room 14B. It was a room in a Shera's hospital building with a large window overlooking the sea. The designer must have thought of that perhaps patients want to see the open sky. When I knocked on the door, a voice whispered, "Come in." My father, Jeffrey, was sitting in a reclining chair, a reclining position with tubes, monitors, and medication, but his eyes, despite everything, were somewhere I didn't recognize, perhaps in the past. Perhaps in my childhood, at the moment I was born. "Alyssa," he said. I didn't say anything. I went inside and stood by the window. "I waited so long to see you," she said, "but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to tell your mother. It wasn't easy to face your sister's side. These were all things I was running away from." The hair had been grafted onto my hair light brown. The eyes, perhaps a hallucination, were the same as my own. I remember the day we sold you, he said. When I opened the money, the feeling I had. Alyssa, I remember the drawing on your face that day. He paused, taking a breath. But I couldn't do anything. I had to pay the debt. I had to live. And I just lived a life of borrowing. For a moment, emotions seemed to surface, guilt, regret. But my background as a civil engineer had taught me to dismantle the structures of emotions. Sadness wouldn't fix anything. Did Robert tell you? I asked. What? Why did he find me? Why did he bring me here? My father shook his head. He interrogated us. Susan and me. Maybe he was right at the time. We were bad people. But he also asked, does Alyssa feel safe in her own home? Does a child come home and realize they've been taken? Maybe it's not her. It's your structure that's failing. I preferred to sit by the window and watch the sea. I don't need your forgiveness, I said, because forgiveness doesn't change the past. And I've learned to live with the past, the choices of its people, their structures, their destruction. That's right, my father said. Absolutely right. But perhaps it's your choice too. To forgive or not to forgive, that's your architect. Your design. I sat there for an hour without saying a word. My father fell asleep. Victoria must have given up waiting at the door and gone to get some coffee. I examined the architecture of his room. Everything was designed for the comfort of patients. But as Robert said, a building is not just a building. People live in it. I left the hospital without saying anything. The Marcus project went into the construction phase within 3 months. I participated, I checked it, I made changes. And then, unexpectedly, while the walls were rising, a letter arrived from my father. It was sent by the hospital. Victoria, I suppose? When I opened the letter, it was handwritten in a trembling voice and said, Alyssa, perhaps the reason I haven't seen your reply is because I understand I don't have the right to speak to you solely as a father. But there's something I need to tell you as a human being. The place you grew up in, the house Robert took you into, what happened there? What you built wasn't just architecture. It was a human being rebuilding himself. I couldn't. You may not have compassion for your father, but be relational to yourself. People live inside buildings, and that people are you. I put the letter in a file, in the ghosts folder, but this time I didn't delete it. The Marcus project was completed. The opening reception was very noisy and glittering. Bureaucrats, journalists, curious people. But late at night, after the crowds had dispersed, I wandered through the projects on my own. The staircases, the balconies, the common areas, everything was exactly as planned. People would feel safe here. They would feel at home. A week later, Marcus gave me a check. $5 million. Beyond the design bonus, it was a management bonus. I'll donate half of this to a social welfare program, I said. Why? He asked, bewildered. Because architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about the world of people. That night, alone in the office, I took out Robert's book. I read the notes in the margins. On the last page, there was a stamp in handwriting similar to mine. Buildings fall. People remain. Learn to build people. The phone rang. The doctor? My father's heart had stopped 2 hours earlier. They'd tried to revive him. It hadn't worked. Maybe that was his last message, all he wanted to tell me. I didn't cry. When I lay in bed, in my gray, silent sanctuary, I slept peacefully. In the dream, I was small, and an architect was showing me the parts that were fixing me. See? The structure is attached to you. But the soul is entirely yours. When I woke up that morning, I had made a decision. I emailed my mother. For the first time in 5 years, I'm going to attend your father's funeral. I just want to be there. I won't say anything. I'll just come and go. The reply came immediately. Please come. We would rather know you're there than just see you. I wore a gray suit to the funeral. Unlike Robert's funeral, this was a small, intimate family gathering. His mother, Susan, his sisters. I found them all hard to look for. My father in the open casket, his face serene. Perhaps he was no longer subjected to an architecture he hadn't designed or controlled. My mother approached me. She held out her hand. She had hoped for this, but at least she tried. "Greetings, girl," he said. "Greetings," I said. I said nothing more. I just sat and watched as the minister was being made. My sisters, Susan and Jessica, looked at me from time to time but remained silent. Perhaps this wasn't forgiveness, but it could be a start. After the ceremony was over, Victoria came up to me. "Thank you for coming," she said. "My father would have wanted it," I replied. "That's right." She would have liked to. "And you came." When I got back to my car, I opened the documents about Robert's legacy. I decided to freeze a portion of the $63 million for urban architecture projects. Social housing, parks, community centers, places where no one will feel alone. Marcus asked me, "Why this?" Because architects build people, not buildings, people. At the end of the year, the first social housing complex was completed. In the working structure, I painted the walls in light colors. The windows are large. The balconies are as Robert designed. Them balconies where people can actually stand and talk to the sea. At the opening, I just stood in the background, preferring to observe. But this time, I wasn't completely invisible. When I got home that night and turned on my computer, I saw a hashtag on social media: "Buildings to be loved by architects. Buildings to be lived in by people." It was written for my project. A week later, a letter arrived from the mother. Handwritten, "Daughter, we miss you. Maybe we could have lunch together? Just you and me." I thought about the answer for 2 days. Then, very simply, I said yes. Lunch was at a cafe of my choosing. I didn't tell my mother about Robert's architecture. I only talked about my current work, future projects, and how I aim to improve people's lives through spaces. My mother listened, tilting her head to one side. "We cut you in a fit of anger," she said in the middle of the meal. "Yes," I said. "And you did it without any dreams, no summer house, no vacation photos. All of this by yourself." "Robert helped," I said. "But yes, it's true that I did most of it on my own." "I'm proud of you," my mother said. And those words were like salty water. Perhaps they didn't change the past, but perhaps they were building a foundation for the future. The year ended quietly, in a controlled manner. I reread Robert's last message written on a page in his notebook. "Alyssa, people live inside buildings. Without people, a building is a wreck. Learn to build yourself. Then others won't be able to try to build you." I had built myself. Success, money, design, they were all building blocks. But the content, that person me, was still incomplete. And perhaps it never would be. Perhaps this wasn't the end, but an ongoing project. Just like Robert always saw you as a project. And this time, it was a very good project. At this point, it was impossible to summarize what had happened in a single sentence, because every moment, every decision, and every silence was interconnected. Some truths were immediately apparent. Others gained meaning over time. Every detail had a profound impact. Unspoken words were sometimes more powerful than spoken ones. Small choices changed the course of events. Misunderstandings created an irreversible distance. And all of this over time came together as a whole. Not every story ends with a clear conclusion. Some conclude quietly, but their impact is felt long afterward. They leave behind experiences, awareness, and lessons. And perhaps most importantly, it is acknowledged that every process carries its own truth. The story also stopped at a certain point, neither entirely right nor entirely wrong. It simply happened and left its mark, and the silent impact that remained was too powerful to be forgotten.